Welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to help trauma therapists be their incredible selves, to be human, to be real, not just a clinician. I'm a big believer in who we are is more important than what we know. And this requires cultivating authenticity, genuineness, and vulnerability, and that requires intention. You can learn more about my courses and workshops by going to thetraumatherapistproject.com. That's thetraumatherapistproject.com. Let's get started. All right, here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. I am very excited to have as my guest today, Jason Reid. Jason, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Guy. I really appreciate having me on here.
You are welcome. So Jason is the founder and chair of Tell My Story. In 2018, he lost his 14-year-old son, Ryan, to suicide. His tragic loss sent him on a mission to educate parents and spread awareness about the dangers of youth suicide. Jason has dedicated himself to increasing awareness and ending the stigma around the conversation of mental health. He's committed to working with parents, educators, and organizations that are in alignment with the Tell My Story mission. He's also a partner at CEO International, where he coaches CEOs on how to be successful. He co-founded National Services Group, which employs 2,500 people across 3 brands nationwide. He's a leader, an entrepreneur, and a devoted family man. Welcome. So
Thank you.
Before we get going here, Jason, share with our listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
So I was born in Canada. I lived in Toronto, Montreal, across Ontario and Quebec till I was 22. And I came down here actually on my 22nd birthday for a job that I had. And that was, I'm 56 now. So it was 34 years ago, something like that.
Awesome. Awesome.
And I live in Southern California. I live in Murrieta, California. With my wife, we've been married for 30 years, and we still have, obviously, we have our 26-year-old son, Derek, who's nearby, our daughter, Ashlyn, who's getting married this weekend and moving back nearby, and my son, Kyle, who lives about 45 minutes away. So family's all really close and comfortable in Southern California, and that's where we plan to stay.
Awesome. Awesome. So what happened?
Well, gosh, here's the message for the story is I can tell it to you as succinctly as possible. You know, Ryan had just turned 14, and Kim and I were away celebrating her birthday, which we like to do every year. And we didn't see any signs that he had any challenges, to be completely honest. And one night while we were traveling, he sent us a text saying goodbye. That night he took his life. We raced back from Mexico. He was in Reid's Children's Hospital for 5 days. They kept him alive. He really wasn't alive. But we were able to spend those last 5 days with him. And at that point, we took him off life support, and he passed on. So the obvious question is, did you see signs? Did you know this was happening? And I can be completely honest and say we didn't know. We were very close family. And, if we traveled together, we eat dinner together. I travel a lot, but when I was home, I focused on my kids. And Ryan was very nice about that part of his last messages about us, but he was struggling. He was in pain, and he wasn't telling anybody. And from my standpoint, looking back on it, I had 4 teenagers. He was the grumpiest. He was the least grumpy of the 4. So I thought I never thought about it. We never thought about mental health as a family because we thought everybody's fine. Mm-hmm. There's no big issues in our life. And you look back and you say there were some signs. He was, a little quieter, more time in his room, thought it was just him becoming a teenager, but there was more to it. And now I look back and go, well, I should have seen this, I should have seen this, and I should have seen this. Mm-hmm. So since then, I've gone on, I've done a couple of TEDx talks out of the gate, a goal cast for dads. I was talking a group of dads in Montreal at a library. Did the movie Tell My Story. We have the new program called What I Wish My Parents Knew that's going into schools now. I've been on a mission to try and make a difference. And I would kind of put it to you this way, guys, that when I started, I was angry and arrogant. And I thought I was going to change the whole world because no one was doing enough. So I said, and I don't know why Siri decided to say something. It's actually not. It's Sonos or something. Sonos now speaks to me. I don't know what that's all about. Sorry about that. But anyways, I set up a mission under ChooseLife.org, which was my original nonprofit, which was great up until all the anti-abortion stuff came back into light. That was, by the way, originally a anti-suicide or suicide awareness name, Choose Life, but it got co-opted. Anyway, let
me, if I may, first of all, I want to,
sorry.
No, that's perfectly right. I just want to jump in here and really thank you for coming on here and sharing this. I mean, there's no other way to say it than this is horrible. I mean, it's so tragic. And for you to come on here and talk about this, I really appreciate it. I mean, it's obviously hard. It takes a lot of guts. And I just want to put that out there and say thank you.
Thank you.
I also, you're welcome. And I also want to move on, but I want to, if we may, you said you didn't see any signs, but now in retrospect, you saw maybe you should have seen this.
Sure.
And a lot of us are listening. I have a 14-year-old son. A lot of us are listening to this and all of our hands are up. What didn't you see?
I didn't see that he was truly hurting inside. I didn't see that he saw 0 outs besides taking his own life. I didn't see any of it.
Why was he hurting? Do you know?
To this day, we'll never know. Right? Because he gave us a couple of quick notes basically saying, I love you, but nothing of any color that said, here's what I was struggling with. And I think this is an important piece for everybody. And I'd like to get, just to take this in a little bit of a different direction for a second. Look at what I went through, my wife went through. I hope no one goes through. And the reality is you're probably not going to go through it because the 7,000 to 10,000, whatever the stats are saying these days of kids that took their life this last year, it's a big number, right? But it's not a big number in the scope of how many kids there are in the world or in the United States. So your odds are pretty good, but here's where your odds are not very good. 40% of kids out there have experienced in the last year some kind of major depression and anxiety issue and they're hurting and they don't know what to do about it. And that's where I kind of want to shift the conversation away from suicide and more to depression and anxiety, because depression and anxiety not dealt with the right way ends up potentially being suicide. But we got to catch it earlier. And the chances are that your child, not yours necessarily, guy, but someone's child has that issue is a heck of a lot bigger than it was when I grew up, when you grew up, and even 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. Even pre-pandemic, it's not. It's massive, right? We are in the biggest mental health crisis we've ever seen, right? And a lot of us don't know what to look at for. I mean, I'm a 56-year-old guy. I grew up, no one did this. We didn't talk about depression. We didn't talk about anxiety. There's no suicide. We didn't, if you were frustrated, if you were sad, someone would tell you to go shake it off. And we just did.
Yeah, right.
But it was a different world, right?
Right.
It's a whole different world now. Like when you and I grew up, I'm assuming we're close to the same age somewhere in there, right?
Yeah, of course.
When the phone rang, it was on the wall, right? And my dad answered it. And he decided if you're allowed to talk to that person, and if he let you, he'd stand next to you until you awkwardly say, I'll see you tomorrow. Right? That was life. we didn't pay attention to the news. I don't know about you, but the news on at 6 and 7 o'clock at night, I didn't watch it. I was 13, 14 years of age. Why the hell am I going to watch the news?
Right.
Because if you ask your son right now, it's a son, right? Your son's 14. Your son probably knows that someone has told him, or he's read it, that the whole world's going to come to an end in 10 years because of global warming. So why bother? That, he was worried about dying from the pandemic, and now he feels like he's probably okay, but gosh, he took that vaccine. So now what's going to happen? Right. And then, are we going to go to war with Russia? And if we don't go to war with Russia, are we going to go to war with China? I didn't think about that stuff as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I didn't have all this pressure to get into school and have the best grades and have a scholarship, because college was cheap. And if you went, great. And your parents were like, you should go. But okay, up to you. So the pressure into being a child today at 13, 14 is so much different than being a child back then. And then you overlay this thing is that when you think about it, as parents, our lives are so much more complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're dealing with the same stuff, right? We're like, oh my gosh, is the world going to come to an end? Both parents now have to work to try and keep things together. They're on social media going, what the heck?
Right.
My life's crazy and this other people's lives are better. So we're trying to keep our stuff together while we're trying to have our kids' lives together. And this has been on the top of my mind a lot in the last 24 hours, because I did a talk with a group of kids out of Saginaw, Michigan, yesterday. Did an online thing. And these weren't just normal, because Saginaw, Michigan is that's a tough place to grow up. Low income, lots of challenges. And the kids I spoke to were 5 top kids from the school district. The school district set it up. And they were valedictorians, football players. One of the kids, just amazing kids. Rosa Parks Scholarship. Like amazing freaking kids. And when I talked to them about their mental health and their families and what it was like, here's the kind of stuff you hear, or I heard. My mom's a single mom. She works 3 jobs. I don't want to tell her what's going on.
Right.
Scared.
Right.
I had to deal with my own stuff because my mom's got her own stuff to deal with. And it's a lot of trying to get by. I hear these kids going, one of the kids said, this is all great, Jay, but the thing we don't talk about? We talk about all these mass shootings and all this kind of stuff. But there were 5 kids at my school and my buddy's school last year, 5 kids at each school, who died from gang violence. And nobody talks about it. So these kids are dealing with a whole bunch of different stuff that you and I didn't have to deal with, right? Because when I came home, my mother was a stay-at-home mother. A lot of people were back then. They could do it. And my mother didn't have a cell phone, and my mother didn't have a computer. And the only thing my mother would do that would distract her from the kids is maybe she watched Days of Our Lives. Otherwise, she's just there to focus on the kids.
Right.
So it's a whole different world, right? But that 12, 13, 14-year-old kid, the brain is the same brain, and you know this better than I would, that we had. But they're dealing with so much more. Am I making sense?
Well, you're making perfect sense. And I think, we're talking globally. I mean, what is your message? What do you want parents to hear that they can do?
Yeah. Okay. So let me tell you what my big message is to parents. Excuse me. I want you to own your kids' mental health the way you own your kids' physical health. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. Right now, when your child walks into your room or stumbles out to have breakfast, I don't want to go to school. The first thing we do is, you're lying, it's Monday morning. You don't want to go to school. And then because that's the normal reaction, right? And then we go, all right, so what's going on? Well, my stomach hurts here. And we go push on it. Oh, well, maybe it does. Go, oh, wait, you got a fever. Oh, wait, I should get you to the doctor. And we go into that mode. Let's go figure it all out, right? far too many times now, our 13, 14-year-old son, daughter comes home and says, I broke up with my boyfriend or my girlfriend, and I don't think life's worth living anymore. And this is just terrible. And we go, oh, you're so dramatic. It's going to be fine. There's so many other kids out there. If they can't see how wonderful you are, don't worry about them. You're going to be just fine. I got to go back to my meeting. And maybe when I grew up and you grew up, that was fine. It's not anymore. So I want parents to go, okay, I need to take an active role in the mental health of my kids, not because I think they might die of suicide, because they might be depressed, and that's a crappy way to live. Them dealing with their depression and anxiety is not a fun way to live.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so parents then ask me, okay, so Jay, I tell me what I'm supposed to do. I'm like, well, I'll tell you a couple of things, because I'm not you. I'm not trained. I'm not a therapist, right? I'm telling you what I've learned from a whole bunch of people I've talked to and the stuff that I've kind of made up on my own. And one of the things I made up on my own is this whole idea of I've never been depressed. Guy, I've never been depressed. I don't know what it's like, right? I have been sad a lot, but it passes. Right. After Ryan passed, definitely sad, right? But depression, no. So what I like to explain to people is that if you've never dealt with depression, then you have to get this through your head. I live in Southern California. I can look out that window most days, not this year, and it's sunny, not a cloud in the sky. If I had someone with me who's depressed right now, they could look at that same sky and they'll see only clouds.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing I can say that's going to make them not see clouds. Right. They're going to see clouds. I can say, what are you, crazy? There's not a cloud in the sky. What are you looking at? So I'm going, I don't see a cloud. And they go, I see like clouds. If you try to convince them there's no clouds in their sky, all they're going to do is shut down and not talk to you. And you want them to talk to you.
Right.
So what I try to say is all you can do is ask them about their clouds and get them to talk about their clouds. What do they look like? What makes them come and go? How do they make you feel? Are there good clouds and bad clouds? Or are they all bad clouds? Mm-hmm. And then with all bit of your body, this is the difference between the mental health and physical health. Resist with every fiber of your body to tell them to try to fix it. The minute you try to fix it and tell them that it's going to be different, or don't worry about that or anything else, they're going to stop talking to you. And they go, well, you just don't understand.
Right.
And this is like to guys like me who have done a lot in life, guys like you've done a lot of life, it's hard because all we want to do is protect our kids. I'm going to fix that problem. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not how you fix the problem. You have to get them, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but you have to get them to talk to you and feel safe and want to talk to you. And the more they talk, the safer they get. The more they get off their chest about how they feel, the better they feel. It's like a pressure cooker, right? Mm-hmm. Those old pressure cookers, this pressure's blowing, burning up, building up, building up. The only way is to release that little dial and let the pressure come out. Otherwise, nothing could blow. You got to release the pressure. And you release the pressure by talking.
I mean, and we all know that that's not easy. It's not easy to, quote unquote, get your kid to talk or invite them to talk or create a space where they can talk. And maybe sometimes they may need to talk with someone else. Right. And that's a hard place to be in. I mean, my kid's 14 years old, and he's really a quiet kid, and it's hard. It's really hard. And it's hard to, look for signs and should I've seen this, or, there's so much going on in each of our kids' lives that you could construct a story that can give you any answer you want. All right, let's just pause here for a second to thank our sponsors. All right, we are back. What are you hearing from kids that's helping you in terms of your message? You talked a little bit about these kids in Michigan and how their parents were off and they're working and maybe they didn't want to burden them. But we'll talk more about that.
Well, So I think that there's kids in some ways are even more advanced than us in terms of their conversations about this with their peers. And I think they're going to their peers because they're afraid to come to us. Now, what does it mean to be afraid to come to us? Well, first of all, we're not that approachable. We like to think we are, right? We like to think as we are totally approachable. Come talk to me about anything. And what we do, I'll stare deeply into your eyes so you know I'm paying attention to you. And then you tell me everything you want to tell me. Kids hate that. Absolutely hate it. They do not want to look you in the eyes at all, ever. Right? And you go, no, I love my kids. Not the point. Think about it. Like, I grew up Catholic. How did a confessional work? There's a round, the priest sits here, I sit here. There's a board in between us. He probably knows who I am, but he's not looking at me. Right? I can talk. He's not going to look at me. He's going to say, give me your Hail Marys. Be nice to your mother. You're out of there. Right? Kids don't want to look you in the eye. That's why you've got to find the time that you can actually talk to them where they feel like they're comfortable. So we just did an album called Songs for the Drive Home. It's out on it's on Spotify and YouTube. It's through BMG Music. And my partners and I did this. It's all 10 mental health songs. The first side is songs for younger kids, second side is songs for older kids, but they're all conversations, things that'll start conversations. So when you're in the car driving home, you can play this album and go, and your kid might go, oh, I want to talk about that. And like, why are they going? Because they're staring straight ahead and you're not looking at you and they don't want to. You're intimidating. Mm-hmm. Get over it. You are. You're taller than they are. So you got to find a time that you can go for a walk and talk. I mean, I'm giving you some tips, but there's no easy way to do this, right?
Right.
But getting them to be comfortable talking to you and feeling like no matter what they say, they're not going to be judged. It's kind of like the whole thing, like, and maybe I'm treading on bad spots here, but the drinking thing when you get kids that are 18, 19, 20, right? You have a choice in this matter. You can say to your kids, you can never drink alcohol at 17, 18, 19. Even though I did, I'm going to tell you can't. And if you do, you're going to be in so much trouble. And you can try that technique and see how that works for you, right?
Yeah.
Or you can say, I don't care what happens. Call me. I won't be mad. Right. But call me.
Right.
Do not get in that car and drive drunk. Do not get in that car with somebody else. Call me. So you know which is going to work better.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's no different. Like, no matter how you feel, how crazy you might feel, talk to me about it. I won't judge you. Mm-hmm. I won't try to fix you. I won't tell you you're wrong. Know that you can talk to me. That's the message you have to get across to your kids, because most people need someone to talk to feel safe around. And that's what therapists do. And not to take away from your chosen profession, but what they really do, from my understanding and what I've seen, is they're easy to talk to. They're not giving you a whole bunch of advice. They're getting, well, what about this? They're asking questions and more, and they get you to talk, and then you feel better after an hour because you spoke about it. You talked. You got it off your chest. Am I on the right track?
I totally agree. And I would even go further and say, a good therapist will do that. Will be able to do that. Yeah. How has this whole experience shifted you? I mean, in the wake of your son's passing, did you have to rewire how you looked at things and approached things? Was this a quote unquote easy transition for you to say, this is friggin' crazy. I've got to start. I want to start, addressing this and helping people. Talk about that, if you would, Jason.
Thanks for asking. No, it's miserable. but this is what I'm supposed to do. So don't get me wrong. I don't walk around crying all day. I've got a wonderful life. I've got 30-year marriage. We're still together. We'll stay together. My kids and I are in a really good spot. My daughter and I went through a tough time for a couple of years, but she's getting married this weekend, and I'm actually doing the ceremony. But none of that, my businesses are great. I mean, I'm able to spend a whole bunch of time in this space. I have a very balanced life, very full life. I'm, 13, 14 hours a day working and doing stuff. But no, it's not easy. But this is part of what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to get out there and say, look, we need to do this differently, and you need to learn from what I learned, what I missed. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't make, this kind of stuff isn't easy, but I do it every week, right? Because I did it twice yesterday. But I'm not complaining about it because I'm very clear that this is what I'm supposed to go do now.
Right.
And I'm supposed to make a difference and help parents see things differently in my own little way. I'm not going to end teen suicide like I thought I might, right? I mean, I had a great plan, by the way. We just have to fix the government, the schools, the medical system, the teachers, social media, and the kids and the parents, and it's all fixed. That's not going to happen. But I stand by my plan, and it can happen. I realized that my big message is to parents, like, you've got to take this seriously. You've got to own it, because like you kind of made the joke about there's not enough good therapists. There's not enough therapists, not enough good ones.
Right.
And like, it's one thing to say, I'm going to be a therapist. And if I was going to be a therapist, what do I want to go do? You know what? I'm going to take marriage counseling, because the worst thing that's going to happen is those two get divorced and whatever. Right.
Right.
But when you decide I'm going to work with suicidal, depressed kids, and it doesn't go well, that's a lot that's a lot. And so there's not a lot of people want to go do that.
Right.
So as a parent, like, if you think you're going to outsource that to someone else, maybe it works and maybe it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I hate to say it, it's inconvenient and it sucks, and I wish it wasn't true, but this is what we need to do as parents. And I'm not saying you need to bubble wrap your kids.
Right.
You need to build resilient kids. They do need to learn that they broke up with somebody and eventually it'll be okay. Right. And they'll find somebody else. They need to learn that just because they didn't get picked up to be the first on the team, they'll be okay. They need to learn that bullies exist and how to deal with their bullies. And that's part of life. So how has it also changed me? I'm a lot more open and vulnerable than I ever used to be. Like, I showed up at home prior to Ryan as the guy who had built these I built these businesses. I coach all these CEOs. I've written 7 books. I've been Ironman and a black belt. I never cry. That's how I showed up. What I didn't share with my family was, I failed at 20 businesses. I never told them about it. It just happened in the background. Mm-hmm. I almost lost the house 3 times. Didn't tell them that.
Wow.
Right. I didn't tell my wife. And yeah, I struggled with my own stuff. But I kept that from everybody, because I grew up in a point where you're not supposed to show that as a man. So unfortunately, what probably happened with Ryan is he looked at me and went, my dad's life is perfect, because that's all he ever saw. And therefore, if I'm struggling, it must be me.
So are you suggesting that we as parents, this might sound stupid, but are you suggesting that, or obvious rather, are you suggesting that we just share more of ourselves, more of the many facets of ourselves, our vulnerabilities, our realness?
I am, to a point, right? I am not suggesting you go home and tell your family, I think I might lose my job on Wednesday.
Right.
Not suggesting that at all.
Sure.
But what if you went home one day, sat with your son or daughter and said, because it's just happening, you know what? I had a tough day today. What do you mean? Well, I got this guy who's a bully at work. I just don't like this guy. Oh, what do you mean? Give your kids the opportunity to see that that's a part of life. Mm-hmm. Bullies aren't just in elementary school and middle school. They're in life.
Right.
Let them give you some advice on how to deal with your bully. You'll be surprised. They'll go, well, Dad, I have a bully. Now you're having a conversation.
Right.
Right. Now you're connecting on a different level. They view us as up here, unreachable. I'll say a word that may not go. They view us almost godlike.
Mm-hmm.
And you go, what are you talking about? I'm just Dad. Not to them. So you're omnipotent, scary, intimidating, even though you think you're not, right? And you're hard to reach, you're hard to talk to. So how do you bring it down a level so you're easy to talk to? And this is, by the way, I mean, I get this stuff all the time. I go through life thinking I'm the easiest guy to talk to, and I employ a couple thousand people, and people tell me, people are scared to death to talk to you. I'm like, why? I'm just Jay. They all have my cell phone number. They keep calling. No, they're scared. I'm like, I don't get it. But that's how your kids think about you.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to try to bring it down. And I'm like, you still have to be the parent. You still have to have rules. And I'm not saying you can't have those things.
Right.
You need to have them. The worst thing you can do is bubble wrap your kids and then say, get out into the world and don't worry about it. I'll take care of you.
One of the things that, I've had a few people on this podcast talk about suicide. And one of the things that I think just I'm curious about is, if you look at stress or discomfort or suicidality on the spectrum, on this side here, we have nothing at all. And all the way at this end, we have the act of suiciding. But to get to that point, you think there must be so much going on. You talked about having no out at all. That is such an intense place to be at. And it's, go ahead.
Oh, I was coughing. I was false.
Oh, no. And it just, when I think about my own kid, I just think about, I'm always asking, what am I not, am I not seeing anything? What am I not seeing? How am I going to see more? What glasses do I need to put on,
And I'm not trying to scare you, guy.
No,
you are fully trained in all this kind of stuff. And I'm not trying to scare your audience. All I'm trying to say is that you just need to pay attention and ask the questions, right? So it's people will ask me from my knowledge going, hey, well, what kind of kids do this? All types of kids. It's not the shy, quiet kid in the corner all the time that does this.
Right.
It's the quarterback who's got the great life that everybody thinks is amazing, who suddenly takes their life, which just happened to a friend of mine. Everybody's, well, what the hell? Because deep down, that kid was brooding and didn't know what to say. It's the cheerleader who seems like she has all the friends on the planet, but in her mind, she has none. There's signs for that, right? It's like when your kids start talking about, I have no friends. And you're like, wait a second, you have friends. I see you with people. I have no friends. Ryan didn't get there, but when I look back at some of my other kids, I heard that from, like, well, I should have paid attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't go into a bad spot, but when they were saying that, I should have paid more attention. I'm like, nah, you got lots of friends. What do you mean? I dropped you off at school. They all grabbed you. But why do you feel you have no friends?
Right.
Why do you feel that way? And what is it? Sometimes, like, does it build? Yeah, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't. Right. Hayden's Corner. Look up Hayden's Corner. Brad Huxtable, a buddy of mine. He lost his son during COVID. His son was playing a video game, reacted poorly to the video game, broke the screen on his computer, had done that a couple of weeks before. And Brad's a wonderful guy. There were no consequences he was going to get happen to him. In Hayden's Corner, he snapped and took his life. Right like that. Because it was like, oh my gosh, I can't live. I just broke this. There's nothing. I know Brad really well. There's nothing in Brad's life or how he raised his kids to make his kid worry about that. Mm-hmm. But in Hayden's mind, he's not. Right? You can't. I wish I could tell you that look for this, this, and this. It's like, no, you just have to pay attention all the time.
Right.
And what I wish it starts off, and what I wish my parents in the movie starts off with, a little girl who's talking about when she was 7 years old, she tried to throw herself out of a moving car, but thank God the child lock's wrong. And people go, they got to be 13, 14. Like they're like, kids got to be 13, 14, 15 years of age before they start thinking about this. What I learned and what I wish my parents knew is they knew when they were 7 and 8 that they were different. They just didn't know who to talk to about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's so many variables, right? There is no one recipe, but I think if I could pull out one commonality of what you're saying is to be able to create a space where you can be approachable, where you can talk, where you can listen. And that may sound simple, but it's not. It's hard to do, I think.
And it's how you do it. I like to tell parents, do not listen to this podcast. Run into your kid's room and tell them you have to talk.
Right.
That's not going to work. How many times have your kids screamed at you and told you to get the F out of their room?
Right.
Because it's their only little space in life. That's all they have, right? Give them that.
Right.
Give them that and go for a walk. Don't look them in the eye. Don't scare the crap out of them. You are intimidating whether you believe it or not. And you kind of want to be as a parent, right? You want them to feel safe, that if anything goes wrong, you're there for them. So you're not on their level completely, but you need to be able to be approachable.
Right. It's walking that fine line. It's
tough.
Trying to balance that. It's really tough. How, as we kind of wind down here, how has this changed your relationship with your other kids? Practically speaking.
Well, I always thought I had a good relationship with my other kids. Now, my daughter and I were challenged. And my daughter and I were tough. She was tough all the way growing up, all the way until she was about 21, 22. For all you dads out there who have daughters and go, wow, my daughter doesn't, well, it does change. It'll change eventually.
I have a daughter who's 8. I'm like, oh my God, it's tough with her.
Oh man. I always joke about it. I've always joked about going, raising boys is somewhat easy because I've never hit my kids out of anger, but my boys are still afraid I might. So if I get mad, they're still going to step back. There's an element of respect. My daughter's like, what are you going to do? Right. She knows. But I guess my point is, I think I got a great relationship with my kids, but I had a great relationship with all my kids prior. Now, am I a little more vulnerable, a little easier to get along with, a little less intense? Yeah. I mean, I'm a little different phase in my life. I'm not worried about my businesses. I'm not worried about money. I'm not worried about those things. So those things take pressure on all of us, right? So when you're a parent and you're a father and a mother and you're trying to pay the bills and pay for college and figure this stuff out and you've got all that pressure, I get it. It's a lot. And it's not fair to have that and come home and have somebody go, I want to talk to you. It's 10 o'clock at night. You're like, I can't even think straight. I can't. Why do we have to do this now? Can we do this later? Here's what I'm going to encourage you to do. Yeah, I know it sucks. When they come to you at 10 o'clock at night and you're exhausted, figure it out and talk to them. Because you don't know if that's the important time to talk to them.
Right.
And you don't know if they'll come back to you another time. And I did that multiple times. Like I worked out of the house, like my office in the attic, and there comes when the kids come and go, hey, can we talk? I'm like, let me finish this phone call and I'll come get you in an hour.
Yep.
I come get them in an hour. I'm like, what's up? They're like, no, I'm good. Don't worry about it.
Yep.
So it's inconvenient being a parent. And it's inconvenient and unfair that you just don't have to pay attention to their stomach ache anymore. You have to pay attention to more than their stomach ache.
Right.
And it's unfair that I'm sharing this all with you. And now that you've heard it, you can't unhear it. But I hope that you take a look at what I'm talking about and maybe change your approach just a little.
Jason, the documentary is called Tell My Story. Just briefly, when did you do that? Why did you do that?
So when I was going, I wanted to make a difference. When I was going through Ryan's drawers, his room, you do that. Look for clues, whatever. I opened one drawer and it said, 2 sticky notes. One said, here's my username and passwords. And the other one said, tell my story. So I took that as to do a movie. I'll tell my story, which isn't necessarily all Ryan's story. It's about every kid's story. And I interviewed kids up and down the West Coast. I went to doctors and therapists and call centers and Didi Hirsch, and hopefully give people, when you watch it, you can watch it with your kids. I watch it with your son. It'll start a conversation.
You want kids for what? What do you mean you interview kids? What about?
Oh, I interviewed about how they felt about life, how they felt. I interviewed kids that had been suicidal. They were depressed. Okay. They're sharing their stories.
Wow.
And then when you take a look at the next positive. So Tell My Story is up on, Amazon Prime, Apple, wherever you watch your stuff, right? You can get the movie. The next iteration of that movie is What I Wish My Parents Knew, which the trailer is on tellmystory.org. And that I interviewed 8 kids and just them speaking. Because the most compelling part of Tell My Story wasn't me, obviously. It was listening to these kids talk about their mental health and what they thought. So I interviewed 8 kids and we put together a film that's short, but it's 8 kids talking about their mental health and what they felt at different phases. And as a parent, you go, holy cow, that could be my kid. You can't actually see that movie's nowhere to be seen except in programs for schools because it's purposely done that way, where please help me bring this to your school, where we set up an event for parents. You watch the movie and we have a mental health professional talking about what you learned and how to talk to your kids a little differently and what you can get from it. And we're doing that across America right now.
Oh.
So that's when you hear kids talk about their mental health, you go, wow, that's my neighbor. That's my cousin. That's my nephew. That's my daughter.
Oh, Jason, obviously there's a lot to talk about and I'd love to have you back at a later time.
Love to be back. Thank you.
What is the best way for people to get in contact with you?
If you go to tellmystory.org, you go to the contact information, you can fill that out, and that's going to go to all the people that will reach out to me.
Okay.
I'd say, here's my email. I have other people read my email. I'm terrible at it. So if you go to tellmystory.org, if you want to reach me, they will make sure that they text me and tell me to call you. I'm happy to talk to you. I love your help. Anyone who wants to help us get this into schools, into companies, into churches. My message is getting parents to understand they need to own their kids' mental health and helping them be able to talk to their kids.
Awesome. Well, dude, man, you are one inspiring individual. And again, appreciate you coming on here and just being open and real. It was great talking with you.
I really appreciate and honor that you had me on your show.
All right, man. Take care.